The Solitaire Series, Episode 13, The Four of Clubs, by Troy Lambert, narrated by Troy Lambert. Counting cards. To some, it seems like magic. To others, it is a science and a skill to be mastered. For a select few, it is the way they make their living, a skill as valuable as carpentry or accounting, but one that falls solely into one industry, entertainment. Sure, in part, those few keep the house honest, winning where others can't, or in places the odds are so long, customers would be better served by buying scratch lottery tickets, or to stand outside in a lightning storm with a kite and a key, hoping to be struck and enlightened. Beyond those select few, there is an even more elite group, the keepers. They hold secrets and seek others who hold those secrets. Those secrets are hidden in playing cards, special decks, and even occasionally secreted in poker chips. Codes are written and decoded and then discarded. These secrets unlock riches, power, and open doors many don't even know exist. The keepers sit at tables higher than kings, places where the status of a world leader means nothing. They sit and they gamble with the highest stakes of all. No one is ever there, watching. They do what they will, and the rest of the world? The rest of the world pays the price, because in their game, the house always wins. Always. As Jack packed his things, the flames from the explosion subsided. Leaving through the parking lot in his own car would be nearly impossible, and that meant Bert, the man in the red hat who'd been following him, was stuck too. As much as he hated leaving his Thunderbird behind, it seemed necessary. He could come back for it later, as long as certain people saw it there. They would assume he remained as well. He did have a problem, albeit a small one. He needed some place to go, and he couldn't be sure where he would be safe until he got a message back from his connection regarding his trip back home to L.A. Any Solitaire property was out, at least he assumed so, since someone from their organization appeared to still be after him. They, or someone like them, had tracked him to the most recent club he'd visited as well, so that was out. He had money, enough of a stake to work with, and he could use an opportunity to expand it anyway, but he'd have to play somewhere he wouldn't be recognized, at least not right away. That, given his appearance, was nearly impossible. His entire right side was much thinner than the left, the visible flesh scarred and permanently blackened, and his face? No one who saw his face ever forgot it. Hell, Jack wished he could forget it sometimes. The glasses and the hat helped in low light, but the moment he sat down at a bar or at a game, he was marked, something that most of the time was both good and bad. In this circumstance, it was bad. Really bad. He did have one opportunity, a card to play. He sighed. Come on, Boris. His dog, a gorgeous Doberman by any standard, moved to his side and sat. He opened a ride-sharing app and entered a destination. The pair headed down to the lobby. With his good left hand, Jack rolled his suitcase behind him, everything of value from the room inside it. There were things missing, items left in his car in the parking lot, but he would return for those later. He opened the messaging app he'd used not long ago to send a coded message. He didn't expect an answer. Decoding took time. Still, he hoped for one. But there was nothing. A small SUV pulled up and Jack checked the area before getting in. There didn't appear to be anyone watching. Boris followed him in. You sure this address is correct? The driver asked, pointing to the map on the screen set into the dashboard. Yup, Jack said with a glance. That's it. Okay. The driver shrugged and they headed into one of the seedier parts of Vegas. The name of the business was Ardelian Limo Service. A low, small building rested near the street. The roof was flat, the paint on the sign peeling, and a high chain-link fence surrounded it completely. Heavy chain and industrial locks secured the large gate, and the man gate had a magnetic panel next to it. Inside the fence, there were 8 limousines parked in 2 rows of 4. 2 were stretched Hummers, 2 were elongated Escalades, and the remaining 4 were Dodge Chargers. There wasn't a Lincoln among them, and that made Jack sad in a small way. His love of Fords came from his grandfather, and his grandfather's grandfather. The Romanians who ran this business had no such sense of American heritage. They bought what was popular, and the cars most likely to rent for the most money. But limo service wasn't the only thing they provided. He and Boris exited their ride and approached the gate. Jack pulled a card from his pocket, but a playing card thicker than a standard one, and placed it over the magnetic pad. A tiny light next to it went from red to green, and the gate opened with a click. After closing the gate behind him, he walked towards the building and entered without knocking, Boris by his side. "Jack!" The man, looking like a tall football player someone had squished from above, shortening his legs and rounding his belly, approached, wearing a large smile. His shirt was open at the chest, revealing a gold pendant dangling against a dark carpet of hair. On each finger of both hands he wore giant rings, all made of gold, all decorated with gems of various colors. Some resembled the skulls of dragons, some resembled snakes, demons, or other mythical creatures. "Simeon," Jack said. He dropped Boris's leash and lifted his good left arm. The other man gave him a half hug, mindful of his scarred right side. "You could have called for a ride," Simeon gestured outside. "I could, but then someone might have known where I was going." "I get that. Who is it this time?" "Well, I should be free of solitaire, but someone there appears to have a grudge." "So, the Queen of Diamonds is dead?" "I'm surprised you haven't heard." Simeon shrugged. "There seems to be another player, though. I do have help coming, but there have been developments." "Developments?" "There was an explosion at my hotel," he said. "One that seemed to surprise the member of Solitaire I was talking to at the time." Simeon whistled. "Solitaire? Surprised?" Jack nodded. "So why are you here, Jack?" "I need a place to lay low for a few hours, I hope." He pulled out his phone and checked again. Still no messages. He scratched Boris behind the ears with his good hand. "You're hoping to find a game, and that I know of one that is discreet." "I do." "You're in luck. Do you need to win or lose?" "Today, I need to win." "Okay, let me make a call." Simeon disappeared, then was back in a moment. "I have a place for you, off the strip. One of my drivers is on his way. He'll give you a ride." "Sounds perfect." They only waited a few moments, and Jack stayed standing. Boris whined once at his side, but remained still. A honk came from outside, and Jack headed for the door. "Jack?" Simeon said. "Yeah?" "Be careful." "Will do." On the way to the waiting limo, Boris stopped to pee on the fence. Jack laughed and looked back at Simeon, who simply waved. A moment later, the limo sped away, and Jack sat back to relax. It was roomy inside these things, and he leaned forward, taking a small bottle of scotch from the bar and draining it in a single gulp. Things were going to be okay after all. A mere 8 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a club Jack had never been to before. There was little neon, barely a sign, but a large bouncer gave away the fact that there was something worth guarding inside. Jack got out of the limo and stood, stretching the best he could. Boris followed. The bouncer stepped forward. "He can't come in here," he said, indicating the dog. "He can, and he will," Jack said. "He's my service animal." He turned so the man could get a better look at him and removed the sunglasses that hid his face. He smiled, feeling his face wrinkle and sag. The bouncer's eyes went wide for a second, then he recovered. You got paperwork?" "I do," Jack said. He pulled out his wallet and showed the man a card, complete with a regal photo of Boris. The man took the card in his large hands, making it look tiny. He looked it over carefully and then returned it. "You're in," he said, stepping aside, "but keep him close." "Understood." Jack sympathized, but stepped past him and inside. The atmosphere was dark, and there were only a few people seated in various booths. Jack hadn't been given any instructions, but he assumed there must be a game somewhere. He had hardly gotten inside when a thin man approached. His features were Latin. He had a tiny mustache perched under a hawk-like nose, perched on a long, thin face. Wide eyes, much too large for the space allotted to them, looked him up and down. "You must be Jack," he said. "Right this way." "Thank you," Jack said. He left the sunglasses off and didn't replace them with his other pair, the ones he had for indoors that still hid his missing eye, in part because it was easier to see, and in part for shock value. He needed to win. He needed people to be off their game, and this was one way to be sure of that reaction. They wove past a few booths on the way to the back of whatever this place was, and as he passed one, an older woman dressed in a low-cut, sequin-covered dress smiled up at him. As her eyes met his one, her expression seemed to shatter. Jack grinned wider, then looked away. Ahead, a small door in a large wall covered by various expressionist and modern art paintings greeted them. The little man opened it, and Jack walked inside. There were no tables. Instead, a large desk dominated the room. "Have a seat, Jack," a large man with his back to him said. He wore a gray suit coat tight across his bulky back. 2 chairs, upholstered in green vinyl, sat in front of the desk. Jack took the one closest to him. Boris positioned himself between the two. The man turned around to reveal a face that reminded Jack immediately of a pug. His nose was pressed in, his face wrinkled around both his nose and his mouth. To complete the look, a short black beard covered his ample cheeks and rounded chin. His eyes were dark and round and topped by thick brows. Either he had a lot of hair that extended well down his forehead, or his toupee was poorly placed. Jack struggled to determine which. "I hear you are having some trouble." "Who are you?" "And that you need some help," the man finished. Again, "Who are you, and how do you know that?" Jack, your trouble is with Solitaire, but you've also gained the attention of another group." "Are you part of that group?" The man laughed. "The short answer is no." "Do I sense there is a longer answer?" "Yes." Jack waited. The man stared at him and blinked a few times. Jack remained silent. "I suppose you want to know what that long answer is?" "Yes." "Give me the card in your pocket." "The card?" "The 10 of diamonds, Jack. Hand it over." "No." "I'll give it back. Just trust me." "If I don't?" "There's the door. Good luck." He gestured the way Jack had come in, but leaving now would be a very bad idea. Jack looked right and left and then at his feet, one mangled, the other an only slightly fully useful appendage at the bottom of his scarred leg. Boris stared up at him. "Okay," he said, and slid the card from his breast pocket and handed it over. The man looked at the front and back of the card and then pressed a button on it. The card split down the middle, not in 2 pieces, but between what would have been the front and back of the card. The man glanced at both sides and then handed them back. Jack looked at the parts. One was still the 10 of diamonds, and the back of it almost felt metallic. The other half was a 4 of clubs. "Bring those along," the man said. "You're going to need them." He pressed a button on the desk, and a portion of the wall slid away. Beyond it, Jack heard laughter, followed by the clink of glasses. With little choice, he followed the man into the unknown. Thanks for listening to the Solitaire series, Episode 13, The 4 of Clubs, by Troy Lampert, narrated by Troy Lampert. Stay tuned for the next in the series, The 7 of Diamonds.